I stepped out of the conference room, still holding my notes, when my phone lit up with Tyler's name. I expected the usual, "How's the trip? When will you be home?" Instead, his voice came through cold and clipped. "I'm divorcing you," he said. "I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where to live." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The bluntness, the smug tone, the total lack of remorse. I steadied my voice. "You sold the apartment," he laughed. "Nicole and I need the money. She deserves better than that tiny place anyway." Nicole, so there it was. I had suspected another woman. Now he was naming her, and he thought he had won. Thought I'd been scrambling sold wasn't his to sell. It hadn't been for months. Ever had someone mistake your silence for helplessness? My name is Amelia. I'm 35, and until that call, I thought I had a partner, not a fraud. Tyler and I had been together for 6 years, married for 4. On the surface, we looked like any other ambitious young couple trying to build a life in the city. We'd scraped together every dime to buy a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that was still up and coming. I remember the exact moment I first walked into that apartment. Sunlight pouring through the wide windows, the hardwood floors creaking under my heels, the feeling that I'd found something worth holding on to. That space wasn't just a home. It was the first real sign that we were building a future together. From the very beginning, I was the one who kept us grounded. I managed the bills, tracked our spending, made sure we stayed within budget. Tyler had always been more carefree. Charming, certainly. The kind of man who could talk his way into or out of anything. Friends called him charismatic. I called him evasive. Whenever I brought up serious matters, savings, retirement, credit scores, he'd brush joke, "Relax," he'd say. "We've got time." And I believed him, more often than I cared to admit. Back then, I mistook his nonchalance for confidence. I thought I was the worrier, the planner, the one who overthought everything, and that he balanced me out. In hindsight, it's clear that his charm was just a convenient distraction. He didn't want to deal with the boring adult parts of our life. He didn't want responsibility. He wanted freedom with none of the accountability. And I made it too easy for him. It wasn't until we refinanced the apartment earlier this year that I saw an opportunity to protect myself, even if I didn't fully know why I felt the need to. Interest rates were dropping, and the bank offered us a better deal: lower monthly payments, less interest over time. It was a smart financial move, but during the process, my lawyer and close friend, Chloe, pulled me aside. She suggested that since I was the one contributing more financially, it might be wise to transfer the deed solely into my name. It was legal, clean, easy. Tyler wouldn't even notice. I hesitated at first. We were married. Wasn't this supposed to be a partnership? But something in me, some deep, unsettled feeling, told me to listen. So I did. When the paperwork came, Tyler didn't blink. He skimmed the documents, signed where I told him to sign, and never asked a single question. That was always his way. He trusted me to handle the details, and honestly, I don't think he ever imagined that I might handle them in a way that didn't favor him. It wasn't about tricking him. It was about protecting myself, just in case. And thank God I did. Because now, he was trying to sell the very roof over my head, the space I had nurtured and loved, and start a new life with someone else, using money he didn't have, and from a property he didn't own. Tyler believed he was clever, that he was always one step ahead. But what he never realized is that I'd spent years watching him cut corners, dodge responsibility, and gamble with our future. I wasn't naive anymore. I had stopped trusting his charm a long time ago. I didn't want to believe I'd need a contingency plan, but deep down, I'd already started preparing for this moment. It didn't happen all at once. Tyler didn't just wake up one morning and decide to become a stranger. It was slower than that. So gradual, in fact, that I didn't see it clearly until it was already too late. At first, it was just a few late nights at the office. Then, suddenly, it was back-to-back business trips to cities he used to say had nothing to do with his clients. When I asked questions, he always had an answer, delivered with that same practiced ease he used to charm his way through everything. "Relax, babe," he'd say, with a quick kiss and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "It's just work. Trust me. I did try to trust him. I really did. But my gut wouldn't let it go. There were new colognes he'd never worn before, receipts in his jacket pockets from restaurants we'd never been to, and vague stories that never added up. He was checking out. The moment that planted the seed of real doubt was at one of his office events, a fundraising gala his firm hosted every year. He insisted I come along, even picked out my dress himself. For a few hours, we played the perfect couple. Then he introduced me to Nicole. She was young, poised, and too comfortable standing next to him. She called him Ty, something I never did. Her hand lingered a little too long on his arm, and when I looked at him, waiting for some sort of reassurance, he just smiled and said, "You're overthinking it. She's just an intern." But I wasn't. I knew what I saw, what I felt, and still, I didn't confront him. I told myself maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was looking for signs because I was afraid of losing what we had. I even convinced myself that if something were really going on, he wouldn't be so calm, so casual, so completely unbothered. Looking back, that was the biggest red flag of all. Tyler was too calm, too collected. He didn't worry because he thought I wouldn't notice, or, if I did, that I wouldn't do anything about it. He believed I was too loyal, too soft, too dependent to ever walk away or fight back. I spent nights wondering if I was crazy, journaling things I couldn't bring myself to say out loud. I cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear. I smiled at work while falling apart inside. And every time I built up the courage to confront him, he disarmed me with that same tired line. "Trust me." So I did, until the day he called and made sure I'd never trust him again. That call, the one where he casually destroyed our marriage over the phone, wasn't just the beginning of the end. It was the end of my denial. Everything I'd feared, everything I'd suspected, came crashing down in one smug sentence. I was halfway through a conference in Chicago when my phone lit up with Tyler's name. I almost didn't answer. I'd just stepped out of a breakout session and was trying to mentally prepare for the rest of the day. But something told me to take the call. I walked into a quiet hallway and picked up. His voice was calm, almost cheerful. "Hey," he said, like nothing was wrong. "Just wanted to let you know. I'm divorcing you." I blinked, stunned. Before I could even respond, he kept going. "Also, I sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where you're going to live. Nicole and I need the cash to start fresh." Then he laughed. "She deserves better than that tiny place anyway." My heart dropped, but I didn't let it show, not even in my voice. "You sold the apartment?" I asked, my tone cool and flat. "Yep," he said, clearly enjoying himself. "Already signed the papers. You'll get whatever scraps are left after Nicole and I take what we need." He ended the call with a "Good luck, Amelia." I stared at my phone for a full minute, the hallway suddenly feeling colder. The fury that rose in me was sharp and blinding, but I forced myself to stay composed. He thought he'd blindsided me. He thought I'd panic. He had no idea what he'd just stepped into. Back in my hotel room that night, I called Chloe. She'd been my lawyer since before I married Tyler and had always warned me to stay one step ahead. I told her everything, every word, every arrogant laugh, every detail about the so-called sale. She was silent for a moment, then said, "He can't sell that apartment, Amelia. The deed's in your name. You own it outright." I felt a jolt of clarity, of power. "You're sure?" I asked. "Absolutely," she said. "And if he's taken money from the buyer without your consent, that could be fraud." Fraud. That word echoed in my mind like a bell. I'd been so focused on the betrayal, the hurt, the insult of it all. I hadn't stopped to think about what this meant legally. Tyler hadn't just tried to screw me over. He'd crossed a line that came with consequences. "What do we do next?" I asked. Chloe didn't hesitate. "We contact the buyer, notify them that the sale isn't valid. Then, I'll draft a formal letter to Tyler. If he's already accepted any money, we'll have grounds to escalate, maybe even take him to court. I exhaled slowly, feeling the shift inside me. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to let him win. Tyler thought he'd humiliated me, but what he didn't realize was that I wasn't just some scorned wife. I was a woman with a plan and a lawyer who didn't miss details. He had no idea what was coming, and this time, I wasn't backing down. By the time my plane touched down 3 days later, everything had already begun to shift. Chloe had moved quickly, just as I knew she would. While I was still in Chicago wrapping up meetings and pretending to be fine, she had already tracked down the buyer Tyler had tried to deceive. The man had wired a sizable deposit to an account Tyler controlled, assuming the deal was legitimate. Chloe explained the situation and sent over proof that Tyler wasn't a legal co-owner. According to her, the buyer had been furious, rightfully so, and agreed to cooperate fully. He wanted his money back and was willing to help make Tyler's life difficult to get it. That news alone gave me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in days. Tyler wasn't going to get away with it. Not legally, not morally, and not emotionally. Chloe had also finished drafting a formal letter to Tyler, which outlined the illegality of the sale, the fact that the deed had been solely in my name for months, and the consequences of fraud if he didn't return the funds and cease any attempts to move forward with the transaction. It was cold, clean, and bulletproof. She sent it to his email, his work address, and even a hard copy to the apartment. He couldn't claim ignorance, not that ignorance would save him. Still, he hadn't responded. That silence said everything. Tyler had never been the type to admit fault. If anything, he doubled down on the lie until the room was burning. I imagined him pacing, swearing, trying to find a way out. He'd laugh it off in front of Nicole, maybe. Pretend he was still in control. But deep down, I knew he was unraveling. And honestly, I was ready for it. When I walked into the apartment later that afternoon, everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. His jacket was still draped over the armchair. His sneakers still sat beside the door. A half-drunk cup of coffee had gone cold on the counter. It was like he'd hit pause on his life here, assuming he'd come back to wrap things up after making a clean getaway. But this wasn't his home anymore. Not legally, not emotionally, not in any way that mattered. I took a deep breath and let the silence fill me. There was a kind of calm that came with knowing I was prepared. For the first time in weeks, I felt grounded. Not angry, not scared. Just ready. I walked through each room, slowly, taking mental inventory of everything. What I wanted to keep, what would be boxed up and left for him, what reminded me of too many broken promises. There was a shift happening inside of me. The woman who had cried in hotel bathrooms and questioned her worth was gone. In her place stood someone who knew exactly where she stood and what she was owed. The betrayal wasn't just his affair. It wasn't even the attempted sale. It was everything. The manipulation, the deception, the complete lack of respect. And now, it was all catching up to him. The letter had been sent, the buyer was informed, and Tyler had no idea how bad it was going to get. But I did. Because while he had been busy burning bridges, I had been quietly building walls strong enough to keep him out for good. He came in like a storm. I was sitting at the dining table reviewing emails when the front door slammed against the wall. Tyler barreled in, red-faced and breathing hard, a crumpled letter in his fist. His eyes locked on mine like he expected a fight. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, waving the paper like it was on fire. "You're telling me I can't sell the apartment? That it's not mine?" I didn't even flinch. I closed my laptop slowly and stood up, meeting his rage with silence for a beat. Then I crossed my arms and said, "That's exactly what I'm telling you." He laughed bitterly, rubbing a hand through his hair as he started pacing the room. "This is ridiculous. You're my wife. That place is half mine. You can't just change that." "You signed it away months ago, Tyler," I said calmly. "During the refinancing, remember? The deed was transferred into my name. You signed the papers without reading them, as usual." He froze. The color drained from his face for a moment, then came rushing back twice as strong. "That's not possible," he snapped. "You tricked me. No, I said, walking to the drawer where I kept our important documents. You trusted me to handle everything because you couldn't be bothered to pay attention. That's not trickery. That's carelessness. And now it's biting you. I pulled out the deed and held it up so he could see the page with my name printed clearly, alone, in black and white. This is legal. Binding. You signed this. His eyes scanned the document like it might rewrite itself if he stared long enough. His hands trembled slightly as he lowered the paper, and the smugness in his face began to crack. You can't do this, he said again, but his voice had lost its certainty. I already have, I replied. You tried to sell something that doesn't belong to you. That's not just unethical, it's potentially criminal. If you took a deposit from that buyer, you could be charged with fraud. His head snapped up. I didn't, he started, then stopped himself. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, stepping closer, keeping my voice low but firm. You've spent years treating me like I didn't notice the things you did, but I noticed. I've noticed everything, and now, so has my lawyer. The buyer's furious, by the way. He's fully cooperating, so if you accepted even $1, you're in deep. Tyler's composure finally gave way. He started pacing like a trapped animal, hands on his head, muttering to himself. Then he turned on me again. You think you're so smart? You think this changes anything? I'll fight you on this. You can't just kick me out. I tilted my head slightly and took a breath. Actually, I can, but I won't. At least not yet. You can stay here for a few days while you figure out your next move. But make no mistake, Tyler. I'm not leaving, and this isn't your home anymore. His jaw clenched, and for a moment I thought he might break something. But he didn't. He just stood there, breathing heavily, staring at me like he couldn't believe the person standing in front of him. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he never thought I'd be the one to outmaneuver him, to beat him at his own game. You blindsided me, he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. Funny. That's exactly what you tried to do to me. We stood in silence for a moment. Then, I walked past him, grabbed my laptop, and sat back down at the table. I didn't need to shout or argue. He was already unraveling, and I didn't have to lift a finger. He turned and walked out of the room without another word, but I could feel the anger radiating off him. The man who thought he had all the power had just discovered that he had none, and I had no intention of giving it back. Over the next few days, Tyler fell apart in real time. I didn't see him much in person, he was avoiding me, but my phone lit up constantly with voicemails from him. At first they were angry. He ranted about betrayal, about how unfair I was being, about how I'd tricked him. Then the tone shifted. He begged, pleaded, said we could work things out if I just stopped this now. He left long messages about our history, his so-called regret, and how I was ruining his life. The final ones were a strange mix of threats and pathetic appeals. You're going to ruin me, Amelia. Is that really what you want? Yes it was, because he'd tried to ruin me first. While Tyler spiraled, Chloe was a force of calm, methodical action. She had all the documentation prepared. The divorce paperwork was finalized and ready to file. Because of the fraudulent sale attempt and my sole ownership of the apartment, I had full leverage. Chloe said Tyler had no real defense. If he pushes, she told me, we'll push harder. But honestly, I think he knows he's... The buyer had officially pulled out and was furious. He'd sent a notice through his attorney, requesting his deposit be returned immediately, and warning of potential legal action if it wasn't. Chloe assured me we were in the clear since Tyler acted alone, but it added even more pressure on him. The world he'd tried to build with Nicole was cracking beneath his feet, and it was happening fast. Lauren came over on a Saturday to help me pack up Tyler's things. She brought wine, takeout, and a ruthlessness I hadn't known I needed. We started with his closet, boxing up his expensive jackets, shoes, and the random junk he always insisted on keeping. His gym gear, his collections. His ego, folded and taped shut. "How's he taking all this?" she asked, holding up a stack of his golf polos with a smirk. "Well," I said, managing a laugh. "He's still pretending he's in control, still leaving voicemails like I'm the villain." Lauren dropped the shirts into a box and sat on the bed beside me. "He doesn't deserve an inch of your space, Amelia. Not in this apartment, and definitely not in your head." I nodded, and something in me settled. For so long I had blamed myself for the slow death of our relationship. I'd internalized his moods, carried the weight of every problem, played the role of the reasonable one. But standing in that room, packing his things with my best friend beside me, I finally saw it clearly. I had been the one holding everything together for years, not him. Me. He had coasted through our marriage, making decisions without consequences, always assuming I'd clean up the mess, and now that the roles had reversed, he had no idea how to function. But I did. I was functioning just fine, stronger even. Tyler was unraveling, but I was finally free. It was late afternoon when Tyler came back. I was sitting at the dining table, sorting through old paperwork, when I heard the key turn, the door opened, and there she was. Nicole. Perfect hair, perfect smile, her arm looped through his like they belonged here. She looked around the apartment with open curiosity and said, "So this is where we'll be staying?" I stood slowly, my chest tightening but my voice steady. "No, this is where Tyler was staying. You won't be staying here at all." Her smile faded. She looked at Tyler, confused. "What is she talking about?" Tyler glanced between us, caught off guard. "Amelia, don't make this a scene. We're just here to get settled." "This isn't your apartment," I said, turning my gaze to Nicole. "And it never will be." Nicole blinked. "Wait, you said you sold this place, that it was yours, that everything was handled." I didn't move. Tyler lied. The apartment has been in my name for months. He had no right to sell it. There was no sale. There is no we staying here. Nicole took a step back, her smile replaced with disbelief. "You lied to me," she asked him, her voice sharp now. "You told me the money was coming, that we'd already closed the deal." Tyler's face went pale. "Nicole, just give me a second to explain." She held up her hand, cutting him off. "Don't bother." Then she turned to me, her expression unreadable. "I didn't know." "I believe you," I said, "but that doesn't change anything." Without another word, Nicole walked out the door, her heels clicking like a punctuation mark behind her. The silence that followed was heavy. Tyler stared after her, then turned to me, seething. "You didn't have to do that." I picked up a folder from the counter and walked toward him. "Actually, I did. You needed to see just how far you've fallen." He looked down at the folder. "What's this?" "Divorce papers," I said, prepared and ready. "You should read them this time." He opened it slowly, his hands trembling. "You're really doing this?" "You threw me out the moment you made that call from your office," I said, my tone even. "You didn't just leave me. You tried to leave me with nothing, so no, Tyler. I'm not heartless." His voice cracked. "I made a mistake, Amelia. You don't have to end it like this." "Then I am," I said, "because I deserve better." "And you? You've already made your bed." He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. Maybe this version of me, calm, controlled, unshakable, was someone new. "I'll give you until the end of the day to get your things," I added. "After that, I'm changing the locks." Tyler didn't say another word. He just stood there, staring, as I turned my back and walked away. I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. I was just done. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Tyler moved out that night. quietly. No dramatic farewell. No final apology. He packed the last of his things into 2 suitcases and walked out without looking back. I watched from the kitchen window as he loaded them into a rideshare and disappeared into the city. And just like that, the weight that had lived in my chest for years began to lift. Over the next week, I began reclaiming the apartment piece by piece. I rearranged the furniture, donated his gaudy artwork, and painted the walls a softer, warmer shade. I filled the space with plants, light, and things that brought me joy. The apartment didn't just look different. It felt different. It felt like mine again. Chloe called a few days later with an update. The divorce was moving forward smoothly. Tyler had signed the papers without a fight. He had no leverage, and he knew it. That night, Lauren came over with a bottle of wine. We curled up on the couch and toasted. "To never letting someone walk all over me again," I said, raising my glass. "To new beginnings," she replied. I looked around the apartment, feeling the silence, the stillness, the freedom. I thought back to that call, how smug Tyler sounded, how sure he was that he'd won. But he hadn't. I didn't fall apart. I didn't crumble. He thought he could take everything from me. But what he really did was set me free.